Hi, everybody. I'm the author of Penetration Testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking, and your instructor for this accompanying lab. So we're going to start with our WHOIS reconnaissance in information gathering. And so, there's a lab manual for you and all that. I encourage you to download that. And then you have, your questions and instructions, and then we, start up the lab. Mine's already started, of course. And, once you attach to the lab, that will hook us up to Kali Linux. You do want to click on the terminal in the bottom left, and that will give us a root shell on Kali. So what we're going to do here is just use WHOIS to get some information about a couple of domains. So this is just information gathering at this point. We're not going to actively attack anyone at this point. All right, so I guess let's see what it wants us to do. So this is a little special that it has the WHOIS server is set to, you see it in the instructions here. It is 192XY3, where X and Y are going to be the same parts of the IP address as the IP address of your Kali system. So typically, like if you were on your home computer, you would do cat etsy.resolve.conf. So that's typically where the name servers are going to be, but this is all cloud-based and stuff. So, that's actually not set for you. So what we really just need to know is our own IP address. Yours is very likely going to be different than mine. That is probably going to be the number one problem that anybody has, is that, if you watch my video and you use the same IP addresses as I do, you have your own lab that's dedicated to you, so your IP addresses will probably be different. All right, so this is, ugly and texty, but basically what we want to know is our own IP address, which is right here. And again, yours is probably different. So mine is 192.185.176.2. We look back at the instructions and it says .3 is with those same other parts is going to be the WHOIS name server that we need to use. So we will keep that in mind. All right, so we have some questions that we need to answer. What is the name of the registrar of ytrap.com? All right, so we're going to use WHOIS, which is a nice built-in tool in Kali. So also very helpful for things like videos. You can actually hit clear and that will, clear out our screen. So, things will be nice and at the top. You also probably do not want to see me type. One, it makes a lot of noise in the video, and two, my typing is really not that great, and I'll have to shoot this 9 million times or so I can, and you can as well, actually. This will probably come in handy if you don't know it. You can hit the up arrow and get your previous commands. So yeah, so we have WHOIS, that is a built-in command, and you see I used the .8 or -H. That is going to be to specify, the server that we want to use for the query. Again, if you're doing this on your host machine, you wouldn't have to do that because it would have a name server in etsy.resolve.conf and it would just automatically pick that up. But again, be sure you put in the right IP address there. Mine 192.185.176.3 because my IP address, when I did the IP adder, it came out as 192.185.176.2. And so I just give it, that ytrap.com domain. So if I just do a WHOIS on it, it's going to be, a lot of information that, we'd have to scroll through. And certainly we can scroll through all of that and, pick out what we need. So what's the name of the registrar? We can find that in here. It's right here, actually. But we can also, just to make our lives easier, we can actually use grep. If you're not familiar with grep, all it really does is, search for a string and so we can take all of that text and we can pipe it. This guy here, he's a pipe, so we're going to take this command and we're going to pipe it into grep, so it'll only show us things that say registrar. And you see this is somewhat less text. Again, we can certainly look through all the text if we want to, but it looks like this gives us a little less. So again, it's name 106 Inc. And next it wants to know, is domain transfer allowed for ytrap.com? So domain transfer, so that's going to be, either allowed or not allowed. And certainly for security purposes, we would want that turned off. Basically, it's, it says whether your domain names are locked for transfer or not. So if your domain name does allow this, it can be transferred, and if not, it can't be transferred. So it's used to prevent people from moving the domain away from your registrant without your consent. This is an attack that has happened in the real world, so it is a good thing to have it so that it is locked. But let's see if this one is. And again, that would just be in the WHOIS information. Again, I'm just using the up arrow here. I encourage you, if your typing is anything like mine, to definitely use your up arrow as a base. And again, we're using that -H for all of these. So we want our domain status. And it says that client transfer is prohibited. Like I said, that's good. That means that it is locked for transfer. If you're interested, I encourage you, to look up, domain transfer and the client transfer prohibited tag there and get more information about it. I gave you a little stuff I stole from Wikipedia with a few words changed, intro to it there, but I encourage you, if you're interested, to look into it more. How many name servers are associated with ytrap.com? And list all of them. So name servers, so those are the DNS servers that are associated with the domain. Actually, the next exercise after this one is on DNS reconnaissance. There are instances where you may be able to attack DNS servers, or at the very least gather information from them. So knowing the name servers of a target, that's definitely something you would like to know. So again, we can just grep for what we want. Name server. And it looks like there are 4, and they are ns.dns.dyn.com. So people sometimes do, especially the bigger companies, they're going to roll their own DNS servers, but, I think mine are all Google. But, there are plenty of services that provide this as well. So I guess the answer to that one is 4, and those are the names. And is DNSSEC enabled on ytrap.com? Okay, DNSSEC. So like most internet protocols, DNS, or domain name services, was not designed with security in mind. That's, like I said, pretty true universally of a lot of what's going on in the internet. And, as time went on, there were and continue to be attacks against DNS as well as other internet protocols. And, security basically needed to be built on top of it. And so, it's not a requirement. You don't have to have DNSSEC. And DNSSEC actually stands for Domain Name System Security Extensions, which doesn't add up to the acronym at all, but they didn't ask me when they named it. So, and again, I'd encourage you, if you're interested, basically things like DNS cache poisoning, where, you could basically poison somebody's cache, basically send a bunch of things that says, I am Google or Gmail. Gmail is a good one because you log into it. So I'm Gmail. My IP address is, 192.168, whatever, and I have, and I am gmail.com. So then when, the victim machine would go to gmail.com, they put that in their URL bar at the top, and their DNS cache would say that the attacker machine is gmail.com, and, I could make a page that looks just like gmail.com, this typical phishing attack kind of thing, where, I get people's credentials because they think that I'm the real gmail.com. So, DNSSEC is, one of the kinds of attacks that it's meant to deal with is something like that. So, it's definitely, again, always encouraged to have it turned on. Definitely good to know, when you're working with a target, whether they have it on or not. So we can take a look at that. And again, just grep for DNSSEC. This one says it's DNSSEC unsigned. That means that it does not have DNSSEC enabled. Again, I'd encourage you, if you're interested to, check out more about DNSSEC and, what these different tags mean. And then we switch to a different domain. So now we're going to look at which organization owns the domain internetsociety.org. So again, you don't have to do the grep. You can definitely just look. But I just, grepped for registrant organization. You'll notice I am putting quotes around things that have spaces in them. You can just always put quotes, but you need it for when you've got spaces because, the command line tends to get confused about, spaces. And the registrant organization for internetsociety.com is oddly enough Internet Society. Fair enough, right? You may have heard of like private registration. So, this for some domains that you work with, this may come out as not something quite as useful. It may come out as private registration, so people can basically hide this stuff, but it looks like this particular organization is not. To which country does the registrant of the domain internetsociety.org belong? Again, I'm just going to grep for registrant country. United States, just like me, oddly enough. Is the phone number of the registrar organization available? So this is, I mentioned private domains, and like having this, like your mailing address and your phone number and, like a administrative contact and a technical contact. These are good places to start for phishing as well. These are people that you might potentially be able to target. So having that stuff available, it's good information for attackers as a starting place. So, a lot of people are probably going to use the private registration to hide that stuff. But I do believe this one does indeed have a phone number. So I'm just going to grep for registrant phone. And sure enough, it does have a phone number. So, that's a number, if you're into the phishing calling. Don't do it on this. This is definitely just for learning purposes. But, this is something that an attacker might, take note of that phone number and other information and, use that as a starting point for maybe some sort of phishing attack over phone. And once again, they want to know, is DNSSEC enabled for this internetsociety.org domain? So again, just grep for DNSSEC. Again, we're still doing the WHOIS. These have all been WHOIS commands with the -H to tell it what server to use, which was the .3. And, we switched domains a couple times. We were at YTrap, and now we're internetsociety.org. We're just grepping for different things out of the WHOIS information. And this one says signed delegation. This means that DNSSEC is on. So that's good. They do have that enabled for this domain. Some of your targets will, some of them will not. But, you may encourage any clients that you have that do not have it turned on that maybe they should. So yeah, that's, this one, all we did was, this is all just public information. Any domain has WHOIS information out there. So, we didn't attack anybody. This is all perfectly legal to look this up on any domain you want to, but, we are able to get, you know, some information just from this. And, that'll be really useful to us potentially down the road once we are actually looking for vulnerabilities and exploiting them. So, that's this one. And, we'll pick up with our DNS work in our next video. So, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.